Welcome to the Mind Money Spectrum podcast, where your hosts, Aaron Ogti and Trishul Patel, go beyond traditional finance questions to help you explore how to use your money to achieve the freedom you want in life.
Hi, my name is Aaron Ogti. I'm a financial advisor in the Bay Area, and I'm here with Trishul Patel, a wealth manager on the East Coast.
Hey, Aaron, great to be here today. And thanks, everybody, for watching and listening.
Great to be here as well. So, a while ago, maybe on the scale of a few years ago, you and I had a conversation about like our single best piece of advice. Like if you were talking to someone just starting out, didn't know kind of what to do, and we didn't have a lot of time to try and help as much as we can with custom advice, just something super simple, so quickly. And our brief advice was basically save more. With the extra little bit of like save more and invest in stocks or S&P 500. It's like the idea of like starting early, giving yourself enough time, compound growth, like everything works out better if you can have a nice high savings rate. It helps keep your expenses down. Like so many things work out later on in life if you can just save more. And I've had a couple client cases over the last 6 months or so where I have found that in these two client conversations, I've not been giving that advice. And I want to explore kind of one, make sure I'm not giving bad advice, like kind of like the sanity check of like, no, I'm pretty sure I'm doing this correctly because I've checked enough things. But two, just exploring those kind of other scenarios where not saving more is still okay. And kind of it's again exploring. I don't know if it's a spectrum of how much to save versus how little. I don't know if it's a edge cases or the nuances when it's okay to not save as much as possible. But I want to kind of think out loud with this and ask for your help with this, Trishul. So before I get to my case, like when you think about like when we came up with that save more, compound growth, invest in stocks, like have you, one, is that still kind of predominant? And two, have you had just mental scenarios where like, you know what, maybe this particular client doesn't need to save as much as either they were or they are?
Right. I remember that conversation. I think the title of that episode was the most important advice in your 20s, something like that. So
yeah, something like that.
We'll link it, but that was the premise. And the notion was, yeah, when you're in your 20s and maybe you have less dependence and less responsibilities, and maybe you're even like single and married for a good portion of that period, if not all, then focusing on putting as much away for your retirement can have significant benefits because you have that power of compounding working for you incredibly well, given that retirement is so far off, or the time where you may need to use those funds could potentially be very far off. And the simple math that we talked about, we gave many examples. Well, one thing we noted, for example, is somebody who saves in his IRA for like 10 years in his 20s and putting in like $6,000 a year versus person B who starts at age 30 and puts in money for 25 years, from age 30 to like age, 55, something like that. Yeah. And then you compare which person will end up having more money. Well, it turns out person A, the person who only saved for 10 years versus somebody who saved for a full 25 years, will have more money just because they started 10 years earlier. So, that we honed in on those types of advantages for somebody that young. So, yeah, it is something quite sensible, but then, of course, there might be some grays that I'm sure we're going to dig into this conversation about.
Yeah, the other context for kind of what's been on my mind, Michael Kitces wrote an article in 2017. I'll reference this a few times about kind of different ways to save for different types of retirement. And that word retirement can mean different things to different people, but it was just you save until you're financially independent and then you stop working. Some people I say like we become work optional, or there's other ways to phrase that, like how you choose to spend your time. And if you save more earlier and give yourself the benefit of more time for compound growth, then that like save until you're financially independent, that financial independence date probably actually happens sooner. So you actually get this like early financial independence kind of idea where it's only possible if you save early, whereas if you start saving later, it's just you can never quite catch up. Like you'd have to save extremely high savings rates where you're almost like saving more than you're spending idea. But it just was not practical. Like the most likely way to achieve that is just start saving earlier.
Yeah, that's the big benefit that you would get for sure.
Yeah. And this article, a couple of the possibilities was like, well, what if you took a sabbatical? What if you kind of took time off? What if you changed careers? That you worked hard in your 20s and saved, but then you realize like at your mid 30s, like you don't like your job. Like you'd rather do something more fulfilling. Like you're 30. Can you imagine doing this job for another 20 years? Like, no, that sounds like the worst thing ever. Okay, what if I switch? And it's like could be moving to a lower paying job because you're starting out in a new career. It could be that you're going back to school. There's different ways to think about that. And so you're combining either some function of not earning money or maybe earning some but not saving as much, and or kind of prioritizing life satisfaction over this. No, you save as much as possible, like because then you're financially independent and then you don't have to worry about it. Then you can choose to pursue that other career. But that's like in your 50s. And the other one was like, what about that? Like more mini retirements, and like that kind of how do you like take breaks and doesn't have to be longer sabbaticals, but just the idea of if you are happy with your work and the like lifestyle that you have, there's two benefits. One is you get kind of more time off now. Like depending, like I don't know how to phrase that, but could be fewer hours per week, or could be more weeks vacation per year, could be time with family. Like there's different ways to think about that. But so it's like you're prioritizing your lifestyle now, and like lifestyle comes first, work and income and savings are second. And two, you have something that you'll find fulfilling and engaging in your 60s, where if you work and like, okay, I'm financially independent at 52 and then you stop working, how are you going to spend your time? That is a very big concern when it comes to retirement planning. And we've talked about in the past of like things like community, relationships, friends and family, some kind of work or volunteer. Like you want to have some obligations, some responsibilities, but like enough time flexibility that it's not stressful. But that's kind of what leads to just general well-being. But it's also that like paid employment is one of those things. And so if you can make that change in your 30s to find that career that you find fulfilling, that you're okay doing longer, then that's like the way the math works out. It's actually okay to save less. And I think I want to kind of explore a few of these ideas because I think you and I have lived one of the classic examples of you leave your salary job to start a business, and that gives you the time flexibility. But there's like lots of scary things with that, creating your own business. But I think there's a couple others that I think I'm giving my advice to clients, but I'm not sure how this is going to work out. But I know that they are happier now, and I'm pretty sure they're going to be fine long term. But it's definitely not like classic certified financial planner training. So I'm curious, like before I get into the couple cases, like do you have any other scenarios or examples of just that idea, like something other than save, financial independence, stop working?
Yeah. I I think my mindset has grown from that traditional understanding. And then even when we started this podcast, the first episode was on fire, like financial independence, retire early. And I think the financial independence part got a good amount of play in that conversation, but then you still have half of that word being retire early. And where I say my kind of mindset has shifted is that retire early part, because it just seems like it's rare to have a situation where somebody works really hard and then stops working, call it, at age 40, 50, even 60, right? Just this notion of you're not going to do anything that's going to pull in any sort of employment, even though you were doing it quite often for decades. And even though there might be things you enjoy, right? So it feels like the status quo should be more about finding employment that you enjoy rather than stopping employment at all. Meaning maybe the purpose of employment should be, this newer acronym that I put out there. I had read, when was this, like maybe a year ago, something like this, where instead of financial independence, retire early, maybe it should be something closer to financial independence, recreationally employed. Meaning you're still employed, but it's for recreation. But why can't that be the goal for everyone? Like, why can't we all just be employed with things that we like doing and we don't mind doing it in perpetuity? Meaning it's not a means or an end. It is the end. Like that's the whole purpose of passing our time. So I think incorporating more of that notion, it's certainly what I've done in my own life, but also what I'm trying to explore with my clients, and it seems to make a lot of sense from many different angles. So I think that would be the one big departure that I think is sensible to think about. Meaning, instead of going really hardcore on the savings and then stopping completely, you can still focus on the savings, but also think of this transition period of where instead of it's all about the income to be it's all about the enjoyment of the income.
Yeah. That's good. That's a good way to phrase it. Like it. Okay, so I do like that. Like, how do we enjoy the income? I think the thing I want to kind of double check right now is more like a time value of money conversation, or like the so much financial planning advisor, like how to give advice is like, okay, imagine your 60-year-old self and like trying to relate present self to future self and making sacrifices for your present self for the benefit of your future self. That's kind of like what savings is. And most of my clients are doing that, no problem. Like they have their job, they have their income, they have their salary, we're saving some, they're going to be financially independent at some point, like everything's going well. But there are two cases. One, their family's getting bigger, they're having another on the way, and they're looking to buy a bigger house in an area that is like fits the school district they want. And the plan was kind of based on company stock, like we'll save up, we'll get there within a couple of years, maybe 2-3 years. But like they liked this one opportunity, and so like they asked, "Are we crazy to do this now? Like this is a perfect opportunity for us. Like interest rates have gone up, so home values have come down a little bit. Like there's a little bit of other things, but like could they do this now?" And to do this, they basically have to reduce all excess savings other than 401k. And 401k, so they're probably getting down to like a 7-8% savings rate for retirement for a few years. We can't know exactly what that number is, but
it's not permanent. It's
for
a few years.
Okay. And so here it's that idea. It's not even a sabbatical idea, but just it's a shift from that you were saving well to be financially independent, say pre-60, and now while that's still possible, because there's still another couple decades before we get there, we've now introduced a realistic possibility that you have to work until 65. That kind of just that idea, because I think that's kind of how I've played the math out. And they like, yes, we're okay with that trade-off of we get the house we want now, especially because of the number of kids that they're going to have now, and then like they'll figure out the other part later. And like when I look at the math, I do the financial planning, so it's like I know this can work, but I guess I'm trying to think of like one. I don't want to say validation, because I think I'm confident that this works for this particular client. But I guess it's like, where do the risks lie? Is probably what I'm thinking of. Is I know the math works out. I know why we have that advice of save more. But where do the risks lie that maybe I'm not considering or not preparing my clients for?
So just so we're on the same page, I assume you tried out this change and it had a marginal impact on the long-term success of the plan?
It requires likely working longer, and or like they need to increase their savings a few years down the road, and or he needs to keep seeing his income grow over the next few years. So like he has to kind of work hard enough to get raises and promotions, kind of thing, which he's done so far every point of his life leading up to this. So there's no reason to think that can't continue. But it's some kind of bet on the future, whether it is possibly reduction in expenses, is less likely, but some kind of increase in income, increase in like company stock grants or company valuation, because there's a decent bet there, and or working long. Like if it's just his salary and just the 401k savings, it's working into like past 65, and should get there in part because like the gap between stopping work and starting Social Security just is pretty small. But it was not our original discussion. It's not kind of our original savings rate. So it's like there's some unknown. How is this going to get back on track? But there's several possibilities that are decently likely, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's almost like an assumption risk is what I guess would be one of my concerns.
Yeah. I think that does zero in on the concern. And really, it's a trade-off, right? The notion is you're trading off some certainty for more uncertainty. And it's even possible that that trade-off ends up being a non-issue. For example, if you do end up making the trade-off, but then you have a good run with the market, it may have not made a difference anyway. Meaning nothing may need to change, even in the median case, meaning 50% of the time, you still might be okay. So I think what it comes down to is if a client is comfortable with the trade-off, with the understanding that there could be a higher chance of having to make some sort of change in the plan, given this this sidestep from the original plan, then it may be quite sensible. And I think the client being able to see, okay, we can get something that's really valuable for us now, and it doesn't even guarantee that we have to make a big change, but it may mean a change down the road that we're comfortable with also accepting, that then it seems like it could make sense.
I guess maybe my, I don't see concern, like my wondering for today, I need a better phrase for that, is kind of classic prudent financial planning advice too conservative at times? The specific example I'm thinking of, and there's another consensus article like references like the 4% rule is a worst case scenario rule. The average with like safe withdrawal rate over the last 100 years is actually closer to like 5.5 or 6%.
Yeah, the
And like the
median.
best case scenario was like you could have an 8% withdrawal rate and not run out of
Mhm.
money if you happen to retire at the start of the right 30-year period. And that's
Yeah.
where the like financial planning comes like, we don't know what the next 30 years are going to entail. So we definitely can't assume it's withdrawal 8%. Probably can't even say like we have to prepare for what if the next 30 years match the worst 30 years so that you
Yeah.
don't become destitute.
And that's where that flexibility comes in. For example, if somebody says, once we have the plan, I don't want to change a thing in my lifestyle, I don't want to do anything, right? Then, okay, then you got to accept the consequences of that. But just a little bit of flexibility can go such a long way. And
That's a great point. That's a great point. Even for my specific example of with withdrawal rates, you can go to like a 5% withdrawal rate. If like, okay, when the markets drop, you don't buy a new car, or maybe you skip the extra vacation and you choose a lesser vacation. Like applying almost like common sense adjustments.
Yeah. Like if you tell a client, okay, so now we have an 80% probability of success with this. However, we can reach that 95% probability of success, but it means you have to work an extra 2 years. But what if you tell the clients, all right, let's stick with the 80. It's up to you. But what if you consider sticking with the 80 and you may have to work those extra 2 years if, you're in that bottom 20% of times where the world didn't cooperate with your best wishes.
So I guess another factor that it comes up to now because a conference I just attended recently, but I didn't actually apply it to this client, probably because they're too young. But things like a reverse mortgage on your home equity, and or using an annuity to like buoy that higher withdrawal rate, like if we get the like we're down on that like that worst 20% scenario, we have these two other ways that like normally are kind of considered untouchable. I guess I'd say like one, no one wants to say like only use my home equity. Like reverse mortgages are really expensive and kids don't get to get the house. It's like, well, I mean that might be okay if kids don't get the house. They're still going to be living their own careers and taking care of themselves. But like, but that's a choice. Kind of like if you really want to like, no, I want to leave the house to the kids. Okay, so that like it changes some of the decision making process. But like it's that idea of flexibility where it doesn't have to be just flexibility with like that withdrawal rate idea, but there's other ways to be flexible.
Yeah.
And yeah.
There was a study that I came across in the last week or two, and it said one of the strongest predictors of just life satisfaction is the ability to just be flexible when things change. Just this notion of you don't need to indemnify everything bad that can happen on day one, and then just sit back and relax. Because even if you do that, something bad is going to come up that you can't predict.
That's good. Yeah, like don't try to ensure everything.
Well, understand that being flexible is your biggest asset, right? You have the assets in your bank account, but the fact that you're able to lean on something else outside of that is something that can pay its own dividends and can make up many gaps that we see along the way.
Yeah. The other client case I was seeing like wife is still working, husband was laid off, and kind of like, can they use the time that he's not working to take a vacation that they could not have done while he was working? Which implies like, one, we're not saving as much because he's not saving his 401k. Two, like we have the cash, but like, can we spend that down at this time? And like, is that unnecessarily risky? But it's it feels similar where based on the age of their kids, kind of like if they and his work, like if they don't do this now, it's very likely they would not do this while kids are still in the house, kind of thing. And yeah, like so it's like is it okay to do the financially imprudent thing? Is what this feels like.
Yeah.
And from their perspective, like they're asking their financial advisor, "Can we do this?" And I'm telling like, yes, as long like here's all the assumptions that we're making of how we're gonna like take care of things in the future. But like, yeah, you have the cash now. You're not destitute. You're not gonna like. He's got to get a new job in the next year or so, and or we gotta make this assumption on working. Like here are the other like the 3 or 4 future possibilities, but it definitely feels like. And they're not even taking time off, well, like except for the husband who laid off. But like, so it's not even like a sabbatical idea. It's just not saving for a year or two.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's one of those things. Sometimes it just takes the notion of, all right, put in the plan and actually see the impact of that. And you may realize, look, it's not even moving the needle. Like if you squint and with one eye and zoom in, you may actually see that change. But
so I think that's part of it. Like this does move the needle, but I'm assuming like a 7% rate of return on investments. So I'm like, that's a little concern. I'm assuming like a certain retirement age. I'm assuming like 3% growth on income and expenses for inflation. So like they don't ever get raises or promotions. I'm assuming they have their current RSU grants and never get a new RSU grant. And so it's like, I know how conservative this model is. And like I said, like let's just go up to the median case. But it's like it's going to require some kind of adjustment. I don't know which one is going to play out.
Yeah. And again, many clients often are once they know the trade-offs, they're comfortable making that play because then they understand the impact, right? It's not going to be completely unbounded, meaning the plan doesn't go in the trash because you just made a good change, right? A pretty impactful change. But then they get, the client gets to evaluate how important is this to my own well-being, and if it is important, then it could be worth the notion that a different change may need to happen down the road.
Yeah, it's like, I guess, like, do I feel comfortable giving? Is median the right word? It's like, what's in the middle between conservative and aggressive? Moderate.
Yeah, moderate.
Am I okay giving moderate advice? Because that's also like excellent versus poor.
Like, yeah, I wouldn't call it that. I think you need better marketing.
But yeah, but you understand what I'm trying to say is like, at what point is it too conservative? I guess I'd say.
Yeah, so I've had this conversation even recently, and frankly, what we end up targeting ends up coming along with a discussion about the trade-offs. For example, if we target something with a high probability of success, a high confidence of success, then what we say is, yeah, the chances of changing the plan are lower. Okay, good. But targeting something with a moderate confidence of success, right, is not horrible. It just may come with more changes. And then we say, okay, here are the changes you may anticipate. For example, those changes may not even be likely. You still will be above the 50th percentile in both cases. Targeting something with a 90% versus a 70%. More than 50% of the time in both cases, no changes to the plan.
Yeah.
But in an extra 20% of the time, you may need to make changes in the moderate case. And the changes that you may need to make may be entirely acceptable.
Yeah. I think that's is it the end of history problem? Like how much has your life changed in the last 10 years? Like, oh man, like so many things. but every projection is like, so what do you be for 10 years from now? Oh, about the same plus a little inflation.
Right.
And it's like so many things are going to change, whether like they're planning for it or not.
Yeah.
And I'm reminded of Carl Rich's idea of like, just let's figure out like your current situation, just like take one step forward. And we're not stopping the 401k savings. We're like, and like in the former case, like buying a big house is a huge decision, but they've been talking about this with me for a while, and it's like, okay, this may not be the perfect time to do it from a conservative, prudent financial planning perspective. They can do it. They got approved. They had the assets. They sold their current house, and like they're gonna make it work. But like, so here's this next life step forward.
Mm-hmm.
And then next time we're gonna talk, it's like, okay, what's the next life step forward?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. So what went through my mind is also there's probably a good bag of tricks that we as advisors can also pull in that can help increase the chances of the plan success without having too much impact on like the lifestyle of the client. Meaning, if they do want to make these types of changes, there's still other things that can happen that can provide tangible benefit without having, again, major shifts from the client's perspective. So things that I like to roll into our plan are the notion of, well, do you have a sensible strategy for your distributions, right? A Roth conversion strategy or a distribution strategy that involves targeting the right taxable accounts. Well, adding that in will shore up the plan. Other things like that are delaying Social Security or providing some sort of end of life contingency or near end of life contingency plans, like you mentioned, with like the fixed annuity or with the reverse mortgage, things like that. So you add in these other tools, and that can provide more stops to the plan from having to make major changes.
Yeah.
And then, the next one, which is not necessarily purely financial engineering, but it's something that's really worth considering. And that's what we talked about earlier in this conversation, the notion of when you reach financial independence, you don't need to stop working completely. In fact, if you think from the beginning that you're going to switch from a time of being employed, for the paycheck versus recreationally employed, have that notion built in, well, then that can make all the difference on its own. Having a period of time where the goal is effectively to transition to a notion of employment that is sustainable and that you enjoy, that can, again, fill in a lot of gaps for these types of concerns on its own.
Can you think of a time where you gave advice that you felt was, I don't want to say risky, but at least not conservative?
I think it happens a good amount, and it's always about, okay, here are the trade-offs. Here's what you're giving up by shifting from the status quo. And then let's chat. How does this feel with you? Is it unnerving, or is it something that gives you more energy, right? Does it invigorate you? Often, for example, when people understand that or when we first talk about this notion of, hey, you don't need to stop working completely, right? You can do something you enjoy, and even if it's pulling 1/10 of your salary, it can make a huge difference on your overall lifestyle. Even if you take that like 4% rule, like 40 grand a year means you need to save $1 million. Well, if your retirement is 2 million, your retirement goal, and you maintain a $40,000 a year salary, well, that's half of your retirement goal right there. So, cut the amount that you need to save for retirement in half just by doing
that. This kind of on the other end of the spectrum, I'm thinking of another client case. He was fortunate enough to be part of a successful IPO, and basically also kept his expenses really low, just based on his personality. Like, really likes working. Like, he has enough saved. Like, he could have like pushed for fire within 2 to 5 years. Paid off a mortgage, and like probably stopped working if he wanted. But he's not going to stop working. Like, he enjoys his work. And he's going to keep working. And so we have him maxing out his 401k, but I've actually been pushing him to spend more of his money. Like, if you're already pretty close to financial independence and you're in your 30s and you're going to keep working, yes, you can buy a motorcycle.
Yeah.
And it's like this, I don't know, it's like the mentality of conservative versus prudent, like, or conservative, like, versus that middle of the road. This is probably also like individualized advice of like not saving more, but I feel much more comfortable with this one, and I'm not quite sure why.
It's the less risk one, right? Because obviously the chances of running out of money in this case are, less.
Yeah,
like
that's
you're
true.
really
Yeah,
sacrificing long-term viability of the plan, because worst case, you stop buying motorcycles.
yeah,
that you don't need.
You're right. It's like, if we even set up like 25% of his portfolio is like an income generating portfolio that sends money to his checking account, because I'm trying to get him to spend some. But even then, like, he is saving more in his 401k, in his Roth 401k, than his taxable investments are sending to his checking account.
Yeah.
So
yeah, these are nice problems to have.
Yeah. I guess you're right. It's like, the risks are just so low to be negligible. Whereas in the other case, but I think in both scenarios, like I don't know, I feel like a cookie cutter financial planner, like, nope, save more. Like, great, you're maxing out your 401k. We got to say, like, let's build up that nest egg. Let's get you to financial independence as soon as we can.
Yeah.
And
I mean, yeah, I was going to say that's why, at least I think you might agree as well. We prefer this notion of life planning than financial planning. Right? We're not trying to optimize dollar signs. We're optimizing happiness emoticons or something.
I'm now wondering if you can think of any other advisor or client case who has a client in their 30s where they're sending money from their taxable investment account to the client's checking account. Like that. Now that I say that, I can't imagine any other advisor doing that.
Yeah, has that come up? No, I'm going to say no. I haven't seen that. But not a bad situation to be in.
Yeah. And again, I've talked to him, like the big strength is that his expenses are so low already.
Yeah.
Like, his expenses like $3,000 a month. And so he has enough cash, like, has a good healthy cash. So like, he's done all the other things right that give him this incredible opportunity. And again, he also got lucky with the IPO kind of thing. Like, so like, lots of things happened in that regard.
Yeah.
I guess I can think of another client. They're not there yet because they're still working, but also it was an IPO case that they're close, if not at financial independence. And it's like they could stop working, but they're still working because they enjoy the work, and they're still saving the 401ks. So, okay.
Yeah.
I'm gonna make sure I'm gonna make sure you're happy.
Like, in my mind, that's kind of recreationally employed, right?
Yeah, you're right.
You're already there, right?
It just happens to be the same job they had before.
Sure. There's no rules on whether it has to be a different job or even less work, right? If you enjoy what you're doing, and you're comfortable doing it, well, great. You found it.
That's great point. They are definitely recreationally employed.
Yeah.
Especially the way you say that.
And just I don't want to turn into a whole life philosophy, but can't that be a goal for humans, right? That just the notion of plan out your life so that you end up being recreationally employed sooner rather than later. And if that works out, then there's your employment problem, right?
Yeah, like because I know when looking at like financial planning scenarios, like so many of the like tricky financial planning problems are solved by just working a few extra years.
Mm-hmm.
Like because you get like especially like financial planning scenarios and modeling like assumes an end of life at some point.
Yeah.
And so you are increasing years of savings and decreasing years that you're drawing down that portfolio.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can just work a little longer, so many things become possible that you would not have thought of beforehand. Like, nope, gotta reach my 15% savings rate in my 401k and or long-term investments.
Well, okay, so here's that trade-off. Let's say you tell someone, okay, you got to work 5 more years. Can you do it? Or then you say, hey, what if you just do 12 years part-time, very low-key, but you enjoy it?
That's a good point. That's a good point. Because again, it's almost like that end of history thing. It's like people could imagine their current job and like 5 more years of this. Okay, I guess I can do that. But like you said, 12 years of anything you want.
Yeah.
Like pretty close to minimum wage would be fine, but based on your skills, you can probably do more than minimum wage. But yeah, 12 years of anything you want.
And look, there's a good chance if you give yourself that career freedom or that entrepreneurial freedom, you'll blow it out of the water just because you enjoy doing it, right?
Yeah.
You build something and you create something that you really want to foster and grow, whether it be a skill or a business or whatever it happens to be. But all that pressure is off because you're doing it because you like it.
Okay, so quick aside. I don't know if it's good quick, but we'll try. You mentioned like starting a business. The thing I had in mind, I have one client in particular, like I could see him going to work for Ski Patrol.
Yeah.
Where like he moved to Tahoe, like got over 100 days skiing this year. Like he loves skiing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm wondering if he could stop being an engineer and move to Ski Patrol for a while.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And he may like it so much, and putting that in the plan, you may realize you can do this. Just in the longer you do it, and the more you enjoy it, then the more you're going to just keep doing it, and the more sustainable that overall plan is going to be.
I'll have to, because we have not discussed that example, but I'll have to ask him our next meeting. That's an interesting one.
Mm-hmm.
Because yeah, he doesn't have to make a ton, just has to make some for longer.
Mm-hmm. Like, here's an exercise that it's worth doing. It's something I did when I first left the career. I designed my ideal day. Like if I could do anything I want over the course of the day, and I could plan this out so that I could set it as like a schedule, what would it look like? And it might involve, for example, for me, I have my slow wake up, check out the news, spend an hour having a nice breakfast, do a workout, spend some time doing some work for like an hour, have a longer lunch where I go on a bike ride, do some work for a bit, work on a hobby, family time, right? And then that fills up a day. Yeah. But within that day, you have a couple hours of doing actual work, which can be part of an employment situation.
Yeah.
And it's sustainable. It doesn't feel like something that's going to burn me out at any given time, because you can take plenty of vacation. You can feel invigorated after stepping away from like a weekend or a long weekend. And even in the course of a given day, there's enough breaks so that it never feels overwhelming. So yes, something like that could be part of anybody's transition to financial independence, where they have this recreationally employed component, but they're not sacrificing their other parts of their actual well-being.
Yeah. I think there's a Kinder exercise that goes along as ideal. I think it's ideal day, ideal week, ideal year. The idea there being your ideal day might involve, for me, like a round of golf, but I'm not going to play golf every single day. But once a week sounds like you get like into that rhythm idea. It's like, well, I'd love to be on vacation visiting Europe. It's like, okay, well, that's great for a week. You're not going to do that every week of the year. Like, you actually live near your family and friends, and so, but yeah, that's a, yeah, I need to get back to using that more. That's a great idea.
Well, yeah, like, so for our listeners, the Kinder that Aaron, you just mentioned, that's one of our earlier conversations. We covered the three, what does he call it? The three
Kinder's
life
three
questions.
Yeah, Kinder's 3 questions. Yeah, it's
to try to uncover what an individual or a client or even yourself, what we really want out of life. And then more of the practice is, what does that actual experience look like when you reach financial independence?
Yeah, I think it's good. Like, it's when you take it from a life planning lens, it no longer seems like it's imprudent, I guess I'd say.
Right, because you're not maximizing dollar signs per se.
Yeah,
but you're
exactly.
Maximizing happiness.
Yeah, smiles.
Yeah.
Is that what you're trying to like simplify?
Yeah.
How many days ended up with a smiley emoji instead of a frowny emoji?
Sure. Yeah.
I like that. Okay. So again, this is, I think, a good reminder, like, yes, the fundamentals when it comes to financial planning do matter. And if you're trying to do it yourself, and like, that's why, like, we only had 5 minutes to talk to someone in their 20s. That's the advice. And I think that's still sound. But on an individual basis, it is possible to deviate from that if you kind of understand the implications, you know why you're doing it. I think that's another factor we haven't talked about. Like that gets back to like the intentionality of not making these types of decisions on the spur of the moment. It's like not being like impulsive or flippant. It's understanding why you are doing this, and from the client's perspective, developing like an internal confidence, like, yes, I'm doing this thing, which might not be the best long-term financial thing, but it is the best thing for me and my family at this time.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's probably another key. Like, and it's, especially now that I've been talking out loud, the former client who bought the house, we've been talking about this for 2 years now, trying to make this work. And other things happened, stocks came down, it's like that like, kind of kept pushing that off. So, but it was not a spur of the moment, even though like the actual home, like, oh my gosh, this home became on the market, can we get this specific one? Like, while that felt spur of the moment, felt like, I don't want to say impulsive, but like it required that time urgency. It was not an impulsive decision. Like, we've been talking about this and planning around it for quite a while. So yes, that's probably another thing that I think about when I think of these client cases. That part is their personality. Part is like, I trust that they actually will be able to increase their savings in the future. That they are not spending frivolously. That they are, from a personality perspective, like aware, self-aware enough that they know that they are taking on some risks, and that they're they're comfortable choosing these risks rather than others.
Yeah. I think I've gone through this in my head, this notion of, is what we do an art or is it a science, right? Like the science aspect is, yeah, there's this conventional approach, and if you plug in all these numbers, you'll get this answer and a probability of success and all of that. But the art is, yeah, you got to understand these nuances. Like, is somebody more likely to spend savings or invest savings? And that's a big assumption that'll go into the plan. Like, are they continually going to move that money away or into? And just all these other nuances that we brought up during today's conversation. There's settings and buttons that we can click, but to understand, okay, how do those play out in real life? We have to have the conversations, and we have to make judgments that are informed based upon our understanding of what's going on, specifically with the individual client.
Yeah. There's okay, I'm hoping you'll help me find a better phrase, because I believe a better phrase exists, but one that I heard that stuck with me a long time ago was like, rules are for the obedience of fools and the guidance of wise men. And it works because, like, if no one's going to think about the rule, then they're better off following it. But if you're going to take the time to understand why that rule is in place, then you also understand when it's okay to break that rule. But again, I don't like the phrase, and I think I've heard something better that didn't stick the same way. But
yeah, I like that. Here's something that's close. I don't think it's better, but I remember, like Rumsfeld once said about his military career, it's all about the planning, not the plan. Meaning, the plan is something you come up with, but once you have it, you don't stick it in a vault and forget about it, or you don't blindly execute it. Although if you have nothing, okay, that's what you lean on. However, the real benefit is in the process of planning, actually doing the hard work, and then doing it again and again and again as things change. That's where the real benefit comes into play.
It's definitely that creative, iterative process over results idea. That if you are confident you know what you're doing, like if you have a good process in place, like, you don't know what the result is going to be, but you have a good process, get a result, good process, get a next result, good process, get a next result. And like, more often than not, over time, you'll get more positive results than negative results. But it's acknowledging the things that are outside of your control.
Right. Yeah. The more comfortable you get with that iteration, the more agile you can be, and the more flexible you can be, meaning the better your chances of success overall. It's like that whole, like traditional software engineering approach. It's called like the waterfall approach. Right. You do all of your design up front, and you do all of your R&D, and then you do all of your specifications, and then you do all of your coding and system, right? So you do all of these things one after another, and then you finally get an end product and it's obsolete. It just doesn't, the whole world has changed. But the newer approaches are more agile, meaning you do a little bit and you get it out there. You do a little bit, you get it out there, and you keep getting continuous feedback. And the more you get efficient at doing these feedback loops, the better your chances of success. The world just changes way too quickly to do otherwise.
And that's same thing. Go back to that Carl Rutcher's, like, where are we now? What's our next one step? And but you have to have that process of like, okay, we took one step. Where are we now? What's our next one step?
Right. Yeah, I actually have one of those slides from Carl where I love showing it, because it's, okay, figure out what the next smallest step is, you do it, and just repeat. That's it.
Yeah.
And that really is a good amount of, when in a former life, I was a project planner. And often you come into your project, there's just hundreds of things that need to be done yesterday, but you obviously can't do that. you just got to pick the lowest hanging fruit and then
Yeah.
pick the next lowest hanging. And you just keep doing that and you'll get the whole tree.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I I don't want to say I feel better that the advice I gave them was okay, but I definitely feel when it comes like, okay, I know what we're going to talk about next time. And then based on that conversation, based on time passing, based on actions, the things happening, we're going to have a conversation. And like, I know we're going to have another conversation, and I don't know what the results of that future conversation are going to be, but I do feel more comfortable with this process. And I think maybe another factor is because I intentionally have fewer clients that I meet with more often, I'm not seeing these clients once a year, like, and exchanging emails like, okay, let's take all the big things and like, it's almost like that waterfall idea. Like so many things are changing. So some clients I'm still meeting with once a month because like there's not a lot of stuff getting done, but it is that quick check-in. Other clients are meeting closer to once a quarter, but like I've met with them enough and I know I'm going to meet with them often enough in terms of frequency that we'll be able to have these conversations without letting things get too far down in a negative way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I always try to remind my clients in the beginning, it can seem overwhelming, just so many competing concerns and a big ball or a knot of, just hair like all tangled up. Right. But slowly and surely you just start untangling a few and then the whole ball becomes unraveled. It just takes time and we'll get there for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Trishul. I appreciated the personal therapy session as the business coach therapy session.
Thanks, Aaron. I enjoyed this conversation as well. I certainly took some notes that I'll be thinking about after we conclude. But always fun. And thanks everybody for listening, watching. If you're enjoying these conversations, do like. I think that helps us on the whole YouTube algo, and do spread the word. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
We appreciate you joining us today for this episode of the Mind Money Spectrum podcast. Be sure to visit mindmoneyspectrum.com to access the entire library of episodes. Remember, it's not black and white, but the wide spectrum of gray area where you get to pursue the freedoms you want in life. Opinions voiced in this material are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. All performance referenced is historical as no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested in directly. Have a nice day.